everyone, it's been a little while since I've made a video, and I wanted to create a new one talking about how to texturize or add texture to your mountains in your paintings. And I'm using acrylics for this. I've been away for the last few weeks, and the last few months before that I've been planning doing painting workshops around the country. So I just did that, went around, visited 4 cities, stayed in 6 hotels, traveled 2,400 miles in my car with my friend Adam, and we just got back, and I was thinking there's a lot of little tips and tricks videos I'd like to do, so I'm going to try to start doing that a little bit more. If you're interested in painting with me in a workshop, I'm trying to kind of get to each part of the country. We just did the Northeast, and we're going to do Ottawa, Ontario in October. But then in January we'll be going down south to Florida, Nashville, Atlanta, and kind of an area right down there. And then probably in the spring we'll do somewhere around Texas, and then sometime, I'm not sure, later in 2015 we're going to do the West, probably Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. So just kind of look for that. If you're interested, you can visit my website, www.timgagnon.com, if you're interested in learning painting or coming out and painting with me at a workshop. But to get back to my tips and tricks video, a lot of things I kind of learned out on the workshops are sometimes it's hard to know how to do some of the fine details of like a tree or rocks or water or things like that. So I really want to try to focus on some of that here in some of these new videos. For this one, I did a mountain here. I can't remember the mountain name, unfortunately. I should have looked it up before I did the video. But it's a mountain in Canada. It's out in Banff National Park. Actually, what we did was we hiked up this one mountain, and when we got to the top, what we thought was the top, there was a tea house up there where they make tea out of the natural water in the runoff from the other mountains. Well, we get up top, and then we didn't even realize that there was going to be another mountain towering over us when we got to the top. It's like never-ending mountains out in Western Canada. If you've never been, I highly recommend taking a vacation out that way, especially if you're interested in the outdoor stuff and a lot of very beautiful scenery. Anyway, what I want to talk about is how to get some of the texture in your mountains. What I like to do is create the entire mountain first and then kind of pick out the major areas that come out, like this big rock here and some of these little ledges and cliffs. Once you've picked out all of those major areas and kind of highlighted them, made them more three-dimensional, what you want to do then is go in with a liner brush and start adding little details here and there. The thing is, when you do this, you don't want to be really specific and say, oh, I'm going to paint this little rock here or this little crack here. You can do that a little bit, but what I find is a lot easier is to just kind of create these crisscross up and down patterns that give texture to the rocks. A lot of paintings, if you go to a museum or you go to a gallery opening or anything like that, if you stand far away, you're like, wow, that looks really realistic, and how did they do that? But when you get up close, you can just see it's just a kind of a sporadic pattern of brush strokes. Not every artist does it that way, but a lot of artists do. They imply things which makes the viewer kind of read it as rocks and cliffs and things like that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and talk about how I do that. Okay, so I have a long liner brush. It's a number 2. This is a Dick Blick brush. Doesn't really matter what the brush is. I think they're all pretty similar. They all have kind of different fibers, hairs, bristles, whatever you want to call them. But really, it's just a thin little brush that holds a lot of paint, and you can get really thin lines. So what I do is I take some of the colors I used for the mountain, and I darken them up with either a blue and a raw umber, just so they're darker than some of these colors up here. And then, in order to get texture, I just spray over an area And that way it makes a smooth surface. So when I put the brush on here, I can get some little lines. So what I do is just kind of almost scribble the brush. I do a lot of vertical, and then I'll go in and throw in some horizontal. Before I said you want to be sporadic with it. You do want to be sporadic, but you want to also pay attention to what you're doing. I mean, you can't just scribble all over it and back and forth. You might be able to do that and get a neat effect, but you want to try to have a little bit of direction when you do it. So if I have a blank area here, maybe I want to throw in a crack or two and just a few little side strokes to create this pattern that gives it a textured look. Okay, and I can do the same over here. What I look for is areas that are kind of plain and flat, and throw in some of these little cracks here and there. Sometimes you can make them bigger, and sometimes you can make them thinner. However much pressure you put on the brush is how thick the line is going to be. So if you push really hard, you can't really push that hard with this brush. I mean, it's a small difference, but the more pressure you add, the thicker it will be, and then the lighter amount of pressure, the lighter the line. So basically, once you've created everything, then you can go in and add some of these textures. And it'll give the mountain a nice rocky, rugged feel. Remember, you don't have to go in and paint every single little rock. You can be more sporadic, but controlled with your sporadicness. You want to pick out areas that you want to add texture to, not just do it everywhere. So remember, you don't have to paint every single rock. What you want to do is focus on trying to get texture in the mountain, and that will have a nice effect. And then as you stand back further from the mountain, the more realistic it will look. So that's my painting tips and tricks video for this week. If you have any questions, you can visit my website, www.timgagnon.com. And remember, I have all those workshops around the country. If you're interested, head on over and sign up, and feel free to ask us any questions that you might have about them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.